Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome back to the Cowboys Roundup. Yes, we're back once again, and we're getting closer and closer to free agency. The season is now been over for quite some time now, that being a week, and we are now a long ways away from the start of the next season. I'm here with my buddy Cowboys Beat, Chris. How are we doing this fine Monday morning?
As long as my eyes are open and the people around me are healthy, everything else is a plus.
Yep, and that's great to hear.
Happy that the football. Honestly, I'm happy that this football season is over with. I
I
am. I'm
completely
happy
agree.
because
This is
look, I do love football, no doubt about it. But seeing the Cowboys they were 7-10. There were some glimpses of hope throughout the course of the season that hey, maybe this could get better. But knowing I think once November hit and Dak was out, I like it was demoralizing watching football knowing we don't have a chance to do anything this year.
exactly. Yeah, it's like once you know your starting quarterback is out for the season, you're cooked. Like there's no way you're going to win anything. And I
And
don't care what
seeing
anybody
that
says.
that team that won the Super Bowl playing as well as they did this year, yeah, that was kind of unbearable. So hopefully the Cowboys can turn it around here and improve this football team throughout the course of the offseason. And next year we're sitting here, hey, maybe we don't win the Super Bowl, but we're sitting here saying, hey, Tyler Guyton has improved and became one of the best left tackles in football. We have the best wide receiver duo in the league with CeeDee Lamb and Tedero McMillan. Brian Schottenheimer has proven himself to be a good head coach. All these great things. If we're sitting here at this time next year, sorry about that. If we're sitting here at this time next year saying, hey, maybe we didn't win the Super Bowl, but we're heading in that direction, I'm cool with that.
Right, exactly. And then one of the big things I wanted to get the key point as to why we're doing this particular show at this particular time and talking about the free agency stuff is that we made it very clear in the previous episodes when Brian Schottenheimer got hired, before he got hired, none of this stuff matters unless the front office does their due diligence and get the ingredients for the next coach, who is Brian Schottenheimer, to do their job. And I know some people are like, oh, you guys are just saying that you like Brian Schottenheimer because it's like Stockholm syndrome, because you don't really have. I'm like, no, because if you look at what has happened, the Cowboys, I didn't like the process. We talked about it, Chris. We did not like the process and how they went about it. They elected to promote Brian Schottenheimer from the OC to the head coach. But then on top of that, this is a situation where they didn't keep a lot of the same staff on the roster. They went out, they got guys like, and you can go look at the list. Like, I want to say at least 60% of the staff are first time coordinators at that position, or it's a first time NFL job for these guys. Like, they went into the college ranks deeper than I've ever seen. The youngest person on the staff is 56 years old, and that's a strength and conditioning coach that, yeah, the oldest guy. Yeah. If you're talking about like the main coaching staff, you have, I think Schottenheimer's 54. Then you have what's his name? Eberflus at 54 as well. I think Brian's actually 51. But then you have Clayton Adams in his 40s and then Nick Sorensen in his 40s as well. The point is it's a lot younger than what we've seen before, like guys in their 60s and 70s. But in terms of just moving the conversation now to free agency, as we currently stand here today, the Dallas Cowboys have $2.3 million. They're under, or I mean over. They're over the cap by $2.3 million, right? And to give you guys an understanding of where we're at in the cycle for this particular offseason, starting tomorrow until March 4th, all NFL clubs can designate players as franchise tags or transition players, okay? And on top of that, the combine is next week, or I believe, sometime next week or 8 days from now. And so the reason I bring all of that up is because we're entering that time period where will the Cowboys use their franchise tag? I believe they've used it pretty much every single time, I think, except for last offseason, because I remember they used it on, if I'm going through my memory correctly, they used it on Dak twice. They used it on D-Law twice. Well, they used it on D-Law twice, Dak twice. They used it on Dalton Schultz, and then they used it on Tony Pollard. And again, the thing that bothers me is that we've talked about, and they haven't used it this go around, Chris, right? But with how they handled the negotiations, I hate how they wait till the last minute to franchise tag a player and then they don't do anything with that. But I wanted to kind of give your initial thoughts on will the Cowboys, or prediction, will the Dallas Cowboys use a franchise tag on any of the players in the free agency pool?
No, because I just don't see anybody that it makes financial sense to do that with. Osa, I don't think, I mean, what would the franchise tag be for defensive tackles? I think it's over $20 million, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me look right now.
So, I mean, if that's the case, you're not going to franchise tag Osa. I don't think you're going to franchise tag Jordan Lewis or Rico Dowdle or any of those guys. So no,
23 million. Yep.
Yeah, and that's 100% against the cap. So I don't see that happening. No, I don't think they're going to use the franchise tag in this cycle.
Yeah, I was going to say to your point, and that's why I wanted to let you go first, is again, I agree with you. They are not going to use the tag, even if you want to be like, but Space, will they use it on an offensive line? Who, Zach Martin? Throw $25 million, 100% at him? Like, it doesn't make sense to do those things because the franchise tag is like a breaking case of emergency situation.
Let's just be honest when we say this, it's completely and utterly inefficient.
It is because the Cowboys, I understand that they've been doing the franchise tag crap before we started doing this show. And I mean, we've even talked about it. Like the franchise tag is one of the worst ways to handle things because it immediately puts you in a worse position when it comes to negotiations because that's the floor for your negotiations at that point if it gets to there. Now, to me, if they want to use a transition tag, but then again, that's assuming that someone is going to sign that person, right? But I don't want to delve too much on that because now I want to turn our attention to who is set to leave. Okay. Now, in terms of the 2024 starters that are set to enter free agency, you have Osa Odigizua, Jordan Lewis, DeMarcus Lawrence, Eric Kendricks, Rico Dowdle, Brandon Cooks, and Zach Martin. Okay, so those are your starters set to go out there. Now, there's a lot more guys on the list that were backups and stuff like that, and I'm going to pull up that list as well. But one of the main things I wanted to get at was you can do a couple things aside from touching Dak's contract to open up cap space. And then I believe they also have to, get $10 million to allocate towards the draft class this year. Okay. Now, if they were to do a Lamb restructure, like if they restructured CeeDee Lamb's contract and they extended Micah Parsons, they would open up around, I want to say $40-ish million. And again, that's not touching the Dak Prescott contract. But Dak Prescott has nearly a $90 million cap hit because of how they structured his contract. That is not Dak Prescott's fault. I want to make that very clear, ladies and gentlemen. It is not a player's fault with how the contract is structured in terms of how the cap hit is. That is on the front office and how they make the contract. So if we're kind of looking at it this way, there is one way to kind of tell you how the offseason is going to go. If they touch Dak Prescott's contract, I think they will be a little bit more active than what we're used to seeing. However, if they do not touch the Dak Prescott contract and they touch, let's just say, CeeDee's contract, and maybe let's just say they touch another player, like as much as I don't want them to do it, Diggs or Terrence Steele, that says a lot to me. Like they're not going to spend a whole lot. But the problem is, and then I'll get your take on this, Chris, you can't field a competitive roster in 2025, and even if possibly making it to the playoffs in 2026, if you don't spend the money. Like this is, and we said it, and I'm going to say it till the cows come home. You do not have the ability to contend doing what you
think there might be some technical difficulties here. Hold up, I'll take it from here. Yeah, no, essentially what Space is saying is that, like, hey, look, Dak Prescott's going to have a big time cap hit this year. I mean, $89 million to be exact, I believe it is. And if they were to, restructure that, I think they can get it down to $54 million. So they can create about, oh, you hear? Sweet.
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello?
I can hear you loud
All
and
right,
clear.
sorry about that. I forgot to just leave a key note that my internet's been going in and out because of the storms that are going on in the Northeast. So just keep in mind if I drop, that's okay. But I was just finishing up. What are your thoughts on this whole their approach going into the 2025 offseason?
I mean, I think they're going to be active in free agency just because, I mean, they have a new coaching staff in here. It's going to be, I think, a different philosophy. And I think we talked about this, not on the show, but I think Stephen Jones did not want Mike McCarthy as the coach of this team going into this season. I think he wanted to move on. And when it comes to that, I don't believe that Stephen Jones, we talked about this, we don't believe that Stephen Jones wanted to invest in Mike McCarthy. So because of that, that's where you saw the inactivity in free agency. That's where you saw the team say, hey, we're going to eat some of these contracts, reset our books for next season, move off McCarthy, and we're going to move in a different direction, and we'll maybe look to reinvest, next offseason. So that's where I think this is going. Now, do I think they're going to go out there and sign like T. Higgins and guys like that? I don't see that at all. I don't see that happening. So when I say they're going to be active in free agency, I'm talking more like tier 2, tier 3 free agents. Probably get, 4 or 5 of those guys. Because, I mean, remember when Mike McCarthy became the coach of this team, they were more active than they were previously in free agency. So I think that, you hear Stephen Jones talk, it's not, we need Tolbert to step up next year. We need that Marshawn Nealon to step up next year. We got a lot of guys on the roster that we really like. It's none of that. You hear in his interviews, hey, I think we need to look at how we need to look at how we do some things. And if that's the case, and they attack it like that, I have a little more faith that they're going to be active in free agency. But honestly, it starts with trying to keep as many players from last year's team as you can. Jordan Lewis, that to me is the one guy you have to sign. You want to move on from Oso Odigizua because the defensive philosophy may not be the same with Matt Eberflus and Aaron Whitecotton. I'm cool with that. I don't think Osa is irreplaceable. And this is a very deep defensive tackle class as well. And I think that you'd actually be better served going and addressing the defensive line with multiple players compared to just one player. So that's where I stand when it comes to that. And yeah, I mean, look, they have to improve this offensive line. And I think they can do that through free agency, whether it's retaining Zach Martin. I think Zach Martin's problem last year was the fact that he was injured. And I think, you get him back healthy, maybe you bring in another offensive lineman, because I just don't think Brock Hoffman is a 17-week starter. Sorry, love you, Brock. Not good enough. So yeah, I think that's where they'll be active here.
Got it. Yeah, no, for sure. I completely agree with you. I think that at the end of the day, this team needs to, this is the period in time where you have to get as many players as you had before going into the free agent market. Make sure they're going to stay on the books, right? And you don't do that with not doing anything, right? Like, if, to your point, would I be upset if Osa walked? No, but you need to go replace this talent if he walks out the door. If Jordan Lewis were to walk, would that suck? Yes, but again, you need to go and replace that talent. Same thing with Eric Kendricks, DeMarcus Lawrence, Rico Dowdle, Brandon Cooks, etc. That has been my philosophy. Like, again, they don't, and I'm not saying you're saying this or I even said this. We've even talked about it behind the scenes. They don't need to go get Pro Bowlers and All Pros in free agency. That would be nice, but what they need to do is they need to fill out the roster with depth. That's what really killed them, because when you have guys that are starters that are underperforming or they're hurt and you don't have the necessary depth to back it up because the young guys aren't ready that you drafted, or maybe they're just not good enough, you're going to see that on the field. And we saw that very vividly last year. And so for me, I think that there are a couple guys, and there's a couple names I want to float around to the chat and also to you as to ways they can go about attacking free agency. But again, it comes down to pressing the right buttons and levers, right? Like we can't sit here, or not us, but the Joneses can't complain about the Dak Prescott contract when you gave him the contract the way that you gave it to him, when you can easily just be like, you know what, we're just going to move on. That's them. They made that decision. Now you need to lie in it. If you really want to sit there and be like, well, at the end of the day, Dak Prescott's the reason we can't build this team. Well, that's bullshit, because you can easily move the money around. You're just choosing not to because you want to blame him. And that goes for any player. And keep in mind, Micah's been applying a pressure on social media. You've had CeeDee Lamb come out here talking about how these trade rumors are so damn annoying, right? You could tell the players are frustrated, right? And I think that, to your point, they have a new coach. This isn't a Mike McCarthy that's coming in from the outside and trying to think about what they want to do, right? Like, okay, at the end of the day, I'm not sure if I feel about Mike a certain way. No, they're bringing in a guy they think is their guy, right? So they're going to feel a different way about it. I personally think that. But here's some names I wanted to float around as we kind of get into the next what's the word I'm looking for? The next offseason, right? Like, okay, so we talk about the free agency. I think we talked about it last time, right? There wasn't a whole lot of guys we really wanted to bring back. It was just kind of like, we are okay with a lot of these guys walking. Like, you got guys like Chuma Edoga, for example. You have other guys that are in that same category as depth, where that's okay if they walk, right? But at the same time, like, you're going to need to do some work. So I wanted to start off with the running back room, right? The idea is like Rico Dowdle's probably looking at around a $5 to $6 million a year deal, maybe over 3 years at the most. And so there's three guys I wanted to get your opinion on. Like, would you rather, like, what do you think about the three? Do you think you would just draft a guy, or what would you think? Okay, so here are the three names, or if you want to throw Rico in there, that's your fourth name. So you have Nick Chubb. He's on the precipice of turning 30 years old. He has come off a gruesome injury, but his market value is looking at around $3 to $5 million deal, like a $3 to $5 million deal. The next guy is a bit on the younger side, Javonte Williams. He's set to turn 25. You're probably looking at around $7 million a year over 3 years, just kind of looking at the same contracts that were given out for players of his caliber. And then the final one would be Najee Harris, a guy that's been consistent in Pittsburgh. How you want to debate how consistent he's been, that's one thing. He's probably looking at around $9 million a year over 3 to 4 years. Now, would you prefer, and by the way, just as a heads up, that would probably be around like Tony Pollard money. So what are your thoughts on that, starting with the running back room? I know that that's something we need to improve upon. Do you think those names move the needle? Do you prefer someone else?
It's a weak free agent class when it comes to running backs, which is fine because it's a very strong draft class when it comes to free agents. So, I mean, like, if I had to pick out of those three, give me the cheapest option of them all, and that's Nick Chubb. Maybe you give him some time to rehabilitate, and you give him an off season, maybe better offensive line you probably have in Dallas, and you have a quarterback that can command the respect of opposing defenses, so you're not running into stacked boxes. Yeah, I would take the $5 million from Nick Chubb than I would the 7 for Javonte Williams and the 9 for Najee Harris. I'm kind of out on those last two. I'm out on all three options, to be honest with you.
Right.
If I had to pick one, give me the cheapest one.
No, and I completely agree with you. I think that, Rico Dowdle coming back would be nice. I don't know what a deal for him looks like. Like, we're probably looking, like I said, around, like, it could be the same money that you gave Tony Pollard because of just how weak the market is. But for me, I would rather just kind of get a guy that will come off the books in a year or two. Like, I'm looking at like the Zach Moss type contract when he signed with the Bengals, where it's like a 2-year deal. So you get yourself some cushion, but it's really like a 1-year deal with an option in it. That's what I think would be the best route to go.
Can I add a fourth option?
Sure. Go for it.
Zekel.
We'll bring him back. There we go. That is our main guy, right? Zekel, man.
We'll bring back that Zekel.
Yeah, right. Nah, again, I'm not.
Do you think they might bring him back?
No, they won't bring him back. And for some people like, oh well, he's on a contract with the Chargers, dude. He was on the practice squad. It's gonna expire. But nah, man, I wouldn't bring him back. We're
No,
not
no,
dealing
I'm
with
talking
this
about
bullshit again.
wouldn't. No, I'm not talking about would you bring him back. I'm saying, do you think there's a chance Dallas might bring him back?
No, I don't think so because
Oh
with how
yeah.
things ended, there's no way he's coming back after that. Like, dude, the only reason he would it would be one thing if he stayed on the Cowboys the whole season, but the fact he got released and then went somewhere else, yeah, he ain't coming back.
I will never count that possibility out. Not saying I want it to. I absolutely do not want it to happen, but I'm just saying I know how much Jerry loves that man. I know how much there are some fans out there would be doing victory laps if Ezekiel Elliott came back.
That's
And
why I don't want him back, dude. I'm
I
so
I
done.
am just scared. I'm just scared is all I'm saying.
Dude, do not bring him back. Just keep him away. I love you,
No,
Zeke,
I
but
agree.
I'm sorry you need to go. Just retire, bro. Let's stay away. But let's go. Let's move to the wide receiver room. I think that this is the one that needs a lot of improvement, right? So you're set to have Brandon Cooks hit the market, right? And I think we feel that Brandon Cooks is wide receiver. Well, not even we feel, we know, we've seen it on tape. Like he is a wide receiver 3 at this point in his career, which he's not a bad player. It's just that you're not like if you're asking him to be your wide receiver 2, it's not going to end well for you, right? But again, with who you have, you got Lamb and pretty much Tolbert, and that's it. No offense to anybody else in the room, but really that's what it looks like. So a couple things and a couple names, right? There's really 2. Tyler Boyd, who would be a cheap option, and then possibly another cheap option, as much as it would pain me, Stephon Diggs, his brother. I mean, he's coming off an injury. No one really wants him given his antics. His contract's expiring. Do you throw a flyer on him? And to be honest with you, if you bring in Boyd or Stephon Diggs and somehow you retain Brandon Cooks, your room's already better than what it was.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah. No,
that's not saying much.
I mean, look, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I would absolutely bring in Stephon Diggs because he's a significant upgrade to what you had. Significant upgrade. And that doesn't mean that you don't address the receiver position in the draft. There's plenty of ways they can go in the draft to where you say, hey, if McMillan's there at 12, you're starting to see that name fall into that 10 to 15 area. If he's there at 12, and you have Stephon Diggs as well with CeeDee Lamb, I mean, there's no question. There's no question that your team is better than what it was last year when it comes to the receiver position. If you're telling me we can run McMillan as our X, Diggs is our Z, CeeDee Lamb is our slot, and we run it like that, that is a great, not a good, a great receiver room. So absolutely I would be interested in Stephon Diggs. I get it. There are red flags around him. 100%. I get it. But he makes your team better. And that's kind of the way I'm looking at this.
Right. And I want to be very clear, ladies and gentlemen. Like the key thing about bringing a Diggs or a Boyd in here is to fill that next gap if Cooks is to walk. And I think that's the key thing is like if I'm signing one of those 2, I'm going also into the draft with the inclination that I want to get a receiver. So let's say we do get McMillan, right? I think the plan is to follow what many of the other teams across the league are trying to do, which is get 2 young receivers and just pay them and then just kind of filter through the rest of the wide receiver room, right? We saw what the Eagles did. The Eagles had 2 top receivers on their roster. They paid both of them, by the way. It's not this bullshit. They can't afford either one of them. They have like 10, 50. They have, it's not 50 million, but like, you know what I mean? Like they have 10 contracts that are like ridiculously expensive, but they make the goddamn money work. The Cowboys getting McMillan or whether it's a Luther Burton or I'm just saying like another young receiver in the room with juice to them will do wonders, especially because you're going to have 5 years of control with that young player by the time CeeDee Lamb's other deal is done, where you can repay him because he's still young and he'll probably, given with how he plays the game, he'll still be kicking at 30 plus, right? And I think that's where I'm at is if you really are trying to win in 2025, You can't sit there, let Cooks walk out the door and just say, we're fine with what we have. We got Ryan Flournoy on the roster, which I was a fan of his.
Season, baby.
Yeah. But no, that's just where it's at. You can't sit here and tell me that is the recipe for success, because it clearly isn't. And the Joneses want to talk about, well, you can't win a Super Bowl in the offseason. Well, you could damn for sure lose one in the offseason. Yeah. So was there any other receivers that you had an idea about, like free agency wise, or not really? Because those were only the two names that came to mind because of the contracts and stuff like that.
I want to go over something when it comes to, adding another receiver, like we talked about with Tet McMillan or somebody along those lines. What that does to your like third down offense, I'm gonna try and bring this up for people so that I can show a little bit of an example. If you give me 1 second, I'm gonna
no worries.
Pull this up.
While you do that, I want to also add something. The other thing too is like I've seen people like talk about, I think Tyler Lockett was another option and many others. My main thing is we got to remember that these guys aren't like super, like they're kind of towards the part where you're thinking these aren't Pro Bowl caliber guys, but they're good enough to help Lamb out. Because if you don't have those dudes that can get open, or more specifically are talented enough to take the load off of CeeDee Lamb, you're going to get what happened last year. Like that's why you had a lot of the offense look sluggish, because CeeDee Lamb is basically being doubled. And then on top of that, you didn't have a run game. So of course your offense is going to look like crap. So yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at this.
So this is what I mean, when you're talking about big downs, when you get in these 3x1 sets, I'm going to try and see if I can get it without the pause on it. So basically what's happening here is they're in a 3x1 set. So that's one receiver, three on the right side, 3x1. Pre-snap, what Doc's looking at here is, okay, I'm going to take a look at the X receiver. In this situation, it's CeeDee Lamb. If you add McMillan, you're talking about the X receiver being McMillan in this situation. So, when he looks to the left side, this is dirty. What dirty means is, okay, if we get a one-on-one to the outside, we're looking at the X receiver. But if they're playing like a bracket or something over the top to, take account for CeeDee Lamb, that's a dirty look. We're looking at, now we're going to go over, look at the foundation of the concept, which is going to be this 3x1 set. So you add McMillan, maybe in this situation, you add CeeDee Lamb to the right side to the 3 in the 3x1, and you have a legitimate X receiver. CeeDee Lamb can play X, but he's not a primary X receiver. Like, he can play X, he can play Z, he can play slot, he can do multiple things across the formation. But, and this is stuff that they love to do. I'm sorry that I couldn't get the pause off that thing. But yeah, those are things that they like to do in some of their, all right, hey, gotta have it third down type of looks. They like to get in that 3x1, and they make teams say, okay, we're either going to guard the X receiver, we're going to guard, which would be CeeDee Lamb in that situation because he's the best receiver. So they have to account for that. Or they're going to play the foundation of the concept, which is the the three receivers to the right side.
Yeah, and again, I like that you brought up that particular point, because that was when the offense was really starting to click, especially when we heard about like how Brian Schottenheimer allegedly had some input on how the offense should operate. And so that's where I think where you need the personnel, right? And also why they failed a lot this year, because I even saw some moments where they were trying to do that same things like they were doing last year, 2023, into 2024. And the personnel they just had, it wasn't working because you had it on film. And on top of that, your guys aren't getting open. And so that's really what killed them. So it was basically like CeeDee Lamb has to outperform the scheme in order for them to do something. But I did want to move on to
and another thing I'd like to add is this is why I like that they went out and grabbed Clayton Adams, because when you have a guy like Brian Schottenheimer, he understands the passing concepts for this team. Right. He understands the passing concepts that work. And when you have a quarterback like Dak, you can run Air Coryell, but you can also run West Coast. He's one of those type of quarterbacks. So I expect that you're going to see variations of the West Coast, variations of Air Coryell combined into this offense where it's like, hey, cool. They got a really good pass rush. Let's get the ball out of our hands. Let's get into a rhythm. Let's do a timing-based approach here. And then, hey, we can protect here. Now let's attack the second and third levels of the defense. And, we talk about the passing concepts when it comes to this team.
Mm-hmm.
What I like is the run concepts with Clayton Adams. I don't think they've hit on run concepts and run scheme in the Mike McCarthy era. You understand the passing concepts that work. You know that they work. Now let's try and get a base and a foundation to a run scheme. And we marry the run scheme to the passing concepts, and that makes your offense better.
Exactly. And I think that's where the Cowboys want to go. They saw whether you're a fan of like a run first team, we saw back in 2014 and through 2016, hey, this is what we want to do, right? Like this is they think is the bread and butter for success. And to be honest with you, that's fine. I think that we're seeing the NFL as we're seeing defenders shrink in size. We're seeing a return to the run game and teams using that. Right. So I think that that's where the Cowboys want to go. And again, when we said it, and I'm going to say it again, you just need an identity and you need to run with it. And if the identity is we're going to be a run heavy team with passing concepts that we've used before that are successful in marrying that, awesome stuff. But I did want to move on to the guard section. Right. So there are two guys that I want to say high on, but not particularly in the sense of like they're amazing players, but guys that could be solid starters for you at the right guard position if Zach Martin retires. Okay. And those are Will Hernandez and Dalton Risner. Okay. Now, contract wise, you're probably looking at about like $4 million, $3 million a year. Okay. For that kind of player. My question would be, was there any other guards that you were looking at, or would there be like a situation where, okay, we're going to like kind of how we talked about like the receiver or running back room. Would you sign a guy, but then draft someone to be over top them in terms of the depth chart?
Trey Smith.
I mean, I wish we know damn well they're not opening up the pocketbook for that. Yeah, we know that.
But I mean, look, to be honest with you, I'm looking at if they sign a guard, I'm looking at them as a short-term option. So if you're going to go with short-term option, my first option would be Zach Martin. That's who my first option would be. If it's not that, I would look at Will Hernandez, but I think the Cowboys need to seriously consider taking consider taking a guard in this draft. And if they don't take a guard in this draft, I don't like that at all, because you have to develop your offensive line here. And hey, you go grab a guard first 3 rounds, whatever it may be, and you let him sit behind Zach Martin. You let him see how he prepares his approach to the game. I think that's going to go a long way for that guard.
No, and I completely agree. I think that for me, whether it's Zach Martin, Will Hernandez, Dalton Risner, or whoever you want to throw in there, to me, it's a 2-year, possible 1-year placeholder, right? And for me, I think that whether you want to draft a guy this year or even the next year, right? This is where like the Cowboys fail at roster construction. They don't actually look ahead. Like for me, it would have been a situation where like, okay, well, this year, if Zach Martin says he's not coming back, we're immediately going to go out there and get a guy that can be a starting quality guard for the next 1 to 2 years, maybe 3 if you really want to push it out there. But I'm just thinking 2. And then you draft a guy, after you go through this draft, you draft a guy next year. But here's the other thing to that as well, Chris, is that the Dallas Cowboys also have to keep in mind that, and this is something that I know they're going to say, is they're going to be like, well, at the end of the day, we think Brock Hoffman's a fine player and we think that he can do well. And again, do I think that Brock is a fine player? I think he's solid, but the thing is again, we've only seen him in limited game action. And I think that's one of the things, like I do like his mentality. I think if he really is to work hard and he develops his game, he's still a young player. I think he can be a starting guard in this league. But again, this is where I get upset with the Cowboys, is that I don't like how we're letting these guys come in that, and we're playing like, hey, we're going to put them on training wheels, even though we don't have the time for that. Right? Like, this goes from the coaching staff with Kellen Moore as an example to many other players from the receiver room, cornerback room, etc. That's where I get annoyed with them. Is like, I want Hoffman to succeed, but my issue is if you make him the starter, I don't know long term how he's going to look, and also not just long term but short term. Like, if he ends up starting getting beat up and all this other stuff, right? And we're like, well, shit, maybe we should have gone after a guard. It's just they like to settle, right? They're not in favor of competition. Like, if it was like you signed Will Hernandez, by the way, Zach Martin retires. You sign Will Hernandez, right? Let's say you draft a guard late in the draft and you have Brock Hoffman. At least you have something there, right? You have some form of you're not settling, right? But knowing them, they're going to just be like, oh, we'll be fine. But then again, they still have to tender his contract because he is a restricted free agent. So did you have any other thoughts on the offensive line or things that they can do to, like, go about that? Pretty good.
No, I think we hit that. This gentleman's saying these fellas don't respond in the chat, so we'll respond to some of the things in the chat. It's just that we have a show structure, and like
yeah, don't worry, bro.
Yeah, we get into it. So, one thing that he said, and this is kind of something that we were saying, like, during the conversation, like, yeah, they do need a true outside threat. That's why I'm not necessarily interested in any of these receivers that they could potentially pick at 12 outside of McMillan. Like, to me, if it's not McMillan, I think that I would probably look elsewhere, because I just think that there's receivers in the second round that fit what you need. I mean, Jaden Higgins from Iowa State, Jack Beach from TCU, Alec Ayomanyor from Stanford. These guys they're better fits for your offense because those are guys that are true X receivers. CeeDee Lamb can play X. He can play slot. He can play Z. He doesn't necessarily have one spot on the field that he plays. He's a versatile receiver in that way. But you probably do, like, he is flat out unguardable in the middle of the field. Unguardable. So to me, like, yeah, I would look to add an outside threat like a Jaden Higgins. That's personally my number one pick if they don't end up with McMillan, just because he is that bigger X type of receiver that I think would fit in this offense perfectly.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And that's kind of, to that point, just going to echo the same thing. Look, you want to have a multitude of players that can do different things. That doesn't mean, like, I'm opposed to having, right. Like, I'm not opposed to having another player like CeeDee Lamb. I think having two CeeDee Lambs is impeccable. But the thing is that if you don't have the same talent level, right, then it's going to be hard, because if he plays the same, like, this is exactly why I didn't want them trading for Jonathan Mingo, because you already have that player on your team. His name's Ryan Flournoy. They literally are built the same. They test the same.
We have Jonathan Mingo at home. Like, when we talk about, hey, we have Saquon Barkley at home and it's Ezekiel Elliott, like those type of memes. Like, no, we actually have Jonathan Mingo at home.
We do. And that's why I was pissed when they traded for Jonathan Mingo, because I'm like, you already have this guy.
Actually have that guy. Like, we're not even trolling when we say that. Like, you actually have Jonathan Mingo at home.
I would recommend look at the measurables between the two and look at how they tested. They are literally the exact same player. It's really funny. But the last thing I wanted to do before we get into the mock draft is go over to the defensive side of the ball and talk about possible options there, because this is just kind of like a blanket of players. Because to me, you can go get a bunch of these dudes, and I think I would be satisfied. So, like, I'm going to just throw some names out. Again, this is from multiple position groups, right? Like, we're talking about names like, for example, like the Solomon Thomases of the world, Marcus Davenport. Again, I'm talking about in the Cowboys realm of things. Of course, there are other players I would love to have on here, but again, I got to put the Cowboy hat. Cleveland Farrell, Derek Barnett. Like, these would be guys for, like, depth on the defensive line. You go to defensive tackle. I'm looking at this list right here. You have guys like Javon Kinlaw, Sebastian Joseph, who I would like to bring in here. Milton Williams from the Eagles, who's probably going to get a big ass payday. So I'm not sure.
Yeah,
You
that
did
ain't
have,
happening.
yeah, you did have Jordan Phillips, but he didn't want to be here. So it is what it is. Those are a couple names
Puna
there.
Ford,
Hmm?
Puna Ford is that guy there?
Let me see. What is he? Defensive tackle or defensive end? I think
I
he's a
think he's the
defensive.
defensive tackle. Defensive tackle.
Ford. I don't see his name on here unless he is a restricted free. Yeah, I don't see his name in here. Unless they have him listed as a defensive end. Hold on. He's listed as a defensive end, but he is a free agent this year. That's another dude I would look at. And then linebacker, right? You talk about like you could bring back Eric Kendricks. You got Zach Cunningham, Chris Barnes from Arizona. You have, and then on the outside linebacker, you have Hassan Riddick. You have Preston Smith, Kazir
That would
White.
be a guy to look out for. Reddick.
What?
I think Reddick. Yeah, Hassan Reddick could be a guy to look out for.
Yeah, Josh Uche. Like, I'm just throwing names. I'm not saying these names would particularly fit, but there is a ton of bodies that you can add into the room to make depth. Again, I'm not expecting any of the dudes I just listed to be super key contributors. You hope they do, right? You hope you get the same production like when the Eagles got a Zach Ball, a guy that, again, I'm pissed because I wanted the Cowboys to get him, but evidently they didn't, and so he ends up having an all-pro season with them, right? But in like also like the Mekhi Bectons of the world, guys that were hurt guys but turn into great players that are starters for you, right? You had 5 dudes on the Eagles that did that shit. And so for me, throwing these names out here, if you can get a couple of these dudes in here, I'm going to feel a lot more comfortable because it's you know what I mean? It's just that's where I get super frustrated because last year they signed 3 dudes, and if it wasn't for Mike Zimmer, Eric Kendricks wouldn't be here. He'd be at San Fran right now. And the 2 dudes that you would have signed were 2 running backs that didn't even make it through the whole season. So that's where I'm like, with Mike McCarthy's initial tenure, when we talked about it earlier in the show, they went out and they signed a bunch of dudes to 1 to 2 year deals. They need to do that. They need to get bodies in the room because if they don't, how the hell is Brian Schottenheimer going to do anything? So what are your thoughts on that? Like any defensive players you're looking at or anything like that?
Hassan Reddick is definitely a name that I'm looking at. I get it. Not a great year in New York there. But I mean, I still believe that guy can get after the pass rusher. That to me would be like if you signed Hassan Reddick, I think you're getting Robert Quinn 2.0. And I know people were saying that like after we signed Dante Fowler. I actually think that that's the case here with Hassan Reddick. So I would personally go after him. Just let him be a third down pass rusher, like passing situations. Let him in the game. Him and Micah Parsons playing opposite of each other. I like that a lot because those are 2 like speedier type of rushers. And you get juice that way. Javon Kinlaw is another guy to pay attention to. 6'5", 320 pounds. He's going to bring size to your defensive line. I want to look at possibly upgrading cornerback as well. Just because, I mean, upgrading, this is what I mean by that. Let's go get depth at that position. So if it's Stephon Gilmore, cool. He's just depth at that position. He's not a starter. He's just depth. Find guys like that because the cornerback room at the current moment, it's just not good enough when you talk about Diggs potentially being out for a good portion of the season. So a problem that the Cowboys had this year was depth at cornerback, and I think they need to improve that. And I'd like to see them improve it through free agency. And hey, if Kalen Carson can step up and be, a good depth piece for you, I'm cool with that.
Right, and that's just kind of where I'm at is, again, I think that for this particular offseason, we're not asking the Cowboys to sign a bunch of starters. They just need to sign guys that can be starters and also depth. And I think that's where it's at because if you're going to lose like 5 to 7 starters or key contributors and you don't replenish that talent and you're expecting the draft to carry you the whole way through, that is not how it's going to work. But again, with how they've talked, with how they've said it. Like they're talking the talk. Like they're saying we need to reevaluate how we do these things. We need to, we understand that we haven't been to a conference title game in 50, almost said 50 years, Lord of mercy, 30 years. What are we going to do to change that? Now so again, I want everybody that's watching this live stream, the video on demand, or if this is a clip on here, do not go after the players. Do not go after the coaches. At this particular point in time, it is on Jerry and Steven and that front office to get players here. They're responsible for getting these players, man. And if they're not going to do their job, I'm not going to blame the coaches or the players for the reason they can't overcome that ineptitude. Point blank period.
I agree so much. Like, all right, same energy that some of these fans got for Dak during the regular season and all these other guys, Micah, during the regular season, at the current moment, have that energy towards the Jones family because they need to do their jobs. They got to get their jobs done. And if not, going to be a repeat of 2024. And I don't think anybody wants that.
Exactly. That's why I'm not pissed at Dak for getting his money. I'm not pissed at Lamb for getting his money. I'm not going to be pissed at Micah when he gets his money. I'm not mad at that. Look, they're not the ones that are signing their own checks. By the way, what's funny is there are people that don't understand how restructures work. That's the team that does that. The player doesn't. Like, people think restructures and pay cuts are the same thing. They're not. Restructures are the team moving the money around so that they can open up cap space for the team to operate. That has nothing to do with the player and the money that they signed them for, right? Like, that is like a pay cut's different. Like, and we saw this with DeMarcus Lawrence. DeMarcus Lawrence took a pay cut. And ironically, it was because he wanted the Cowboys to do stuff in free agency, and they didn't do anything in free agency. That was a couple years ago. And so that's where I get annoyed with this fan base, is that they don't understand the differences between a pay cut when the player is electing, hey, I want to reduce the amount of money that I'm making so that I can help you guys add to the team, versus a restructure where it's like, okay, this is the current deal that the player has, and the team is initiating it, not the player. Two different things. And so with that, I want to make sure, if there's anything y'all could take away from the shows that we do, the energy needs to be right at the Joneses. I do not want to hear shit about Dak Prescott and what he's saying off the field with regards to the team. I don't care about that. I don't care what Brian Schottenheimer's saying at this point. They've already got their staff assembled. Now they need to go get the players. And if they're going to do the same thing, I'm not going to blame anybody else but the Joneses, because I'm not going to have them gaslight me into thinking they can't do anything when they can. Point blank period. So I'll just leave it at that. Now, I wanted to see, we're going to do our next mock draft here, if you want to get that set up, Chris. And this is going to be one we're not trading any of the picks. We're going to just stick and pick, right? And we can just, we don't got to go super fast, but yeah, man, like this is exactly why I really hope the Cowboys, so that we can go into the draft and not have to be like, they need to go after all these position groups. You know what I mean? So let's go ahead and get this thing started and let's rock and roll.
Cam Ward at 1, Abdul Carter, McMillan at 6, Burden at 9.
Oh, wow. Ashton Genty is gone.
Ooh, I don't like this scenario.
Hey, we got to deal with it, though. This is what. So Will Campbell, I'm not sure.
I'm not. I mean, people can see by the PFF grades here. I agree. I get it. PFF grades are not the end all be all. But I mean, look at this: 75, 82, 72. I'm not a fan of Will Campbell.
Yeah, I'm not either. But what would you think if he moved to guard? Are you still not a fan of that?
I'm still not a fan, just because I think he plays a little tall, and at guard, I don't necessarily think that that's a great thing to have there. I mean, granted, you can coach it out of him, but yeah, me personally, I'm not. I'm good on Will Campbell at 12.
Gotcha. All right, let's look down. Let's see what other options we have. We have Emeka Ibuka. We do have Kelvin Banks, Michael Williams,
Walter Nolan, Arman Membu. Jackson. Yeah.
No. Let's go back up. To me, like, and I'm a fan of Mike Green, but I think if it were me, I would stick and pick Emeka. But I mean, if I'm a Penn State guy. Everyone knows that. I would take Tyler Warren, but I know that they won't. because they have faith in Jake Ferguson. I think that Tyler Warren's a great player, but I think that the pick here is probably Emeka Egbuka. You get a receiver aside CeeDee Lamb, and you cook. You go from
You know
there.
what? My pick here would be Josh Simmons.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, just
He
because
does have the injury problem. What about Kelvin Banks?
I know we took him before. Let's have some fun. Let's say they go the receiver route. Let's have fun with that.
We'll go Egbuka at 12.
Just so we're not kind of being similar, Also, we can kind of see how everyone else falls in the draft.
Yeah, I want absolutely nothing to do with Will Campbell. I hope he gets off the board early.
Knowing the Cowboys, they'll be like, "Oh, he's a blinking red light." Alrighty.
I like
now we're cooking. Now we're cooking. See, this is exactly why I like over.
I like this board.
Yeah, this board's a lot better than the first round. Shit.
Now,
okay,
to me,
I'm thinking Tyler Booker.
I'm
thinking Tyler Booker. Yeah, because dude,
these two are really good players, Jahad Campbell and Xavier Watts, but I'm going Tyler Booker.
Let's go with Tyler Booker. We get our guard, and I mean, really, you could have gone in any direction, and I wouldn't have been upset. But
Xavier Watts, Jahad Campbell, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. This board, not as good. You have Tej Johnson, but we already have a receiver. Deion Walker.
Yeah,
Noah Dotson, RJ Harvey. Here's the thing, and this is where I struggle. Like, man, if we don't get a back here, I mean, and there's not really.
Well, could we take a look? Yeah.
DJ Giddens. Where's Jordan James? Jordan James is ranked at 106. I would pick him in the third round, me personally, but yeah,
I'm thinking I can maybe hold off till round 5 at that point. I mean,
yeah,
but I'm really, I don't know.
To me, man. I would go Azariah.
I was thinking that or Kobe Bryant out of Kansas, one of the two.
I think that.
Yeah, I was kind of doing some looking at the cornerback room. I'm thinking between him and Kobe. But I'm probably, if this is the case, I'd probably go with Thomas here just because he's on the board.
I'm going with Thomas too.
Yeah, let's go there.
You have to improve your cornerback room, and Azariah Thomas, boom.
And then we're just going to be hope that we don't get wiped out by running backs, which I don't think we will.
No, this running back class definitely stretches.
Which is part of why we do these scenarios, because you just don't know what's going to happen. And I think that that's what makes this fun. So let's see. So I do. Let's see what the running back room looks like, if you don't mind. So we have Trevor Etienne. We still have Taj. Okay.
Khalil Mullings.
Fan of his. Probably would prefer some of the other players.
Damn. 6'2", 233.
I would prefer some of the other players, though, because I like Etienne out of Georgia.
I like Monungai.
Yes, I'm familiar with him from Rutgers.
Like Kyle Monungai.
Let's see. To me, like I really like Trevor Etienne, mainly because of his age, but also like he kind of has the same build as an Ashton Genty. I'm not saying he runs the same, but
he's got juice.
He's got juice. Taj, like to me, like you can maybe hold off a bit and take Taj Brooks in a little bit, but I'm just kind of worried. So let's see what other players are on the board.
I'd go Etienne.
Well, before we do that, let's just take a look at the other players on the board just to make sure if that's the pick we want to go with. That's all. So Quinn Ewers, just scroll down a bit. Kyle McCoy, Kobe King, fan of his, CJ West.
I'd go CJ West here, to be honest with you.
Let's go with CJ West, and let's see how far we can stretch this running back room out, because we do need some interior defensive line. All right. Here I'd probably take Taj Brooks, or if he's
okay. So me personally, I'd take Jordan James here.
Okay.
That's where I'd go.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I'm thinking that, I mean, Ollie Gordon, to be honest with you, like the only thing that's like really pulling him down is what happened this year, but
Hey, I would take Jordan James because that's going to be like your juice type of guy. And then, hey, if Taj
Yeah.
Brooks is there, I like later, we can take Taj Brooks as well. Like, there's nothing wrong with doubling down
Yeah,
at
let's go
running
with
back.
let's go with Jordan James. Let's do that. And then I'm thinking I want to go with Kyle McCord here. Just because, again, it's not like the thing is you're gonna like the reason I want him is because it's more for Cooper Rush, if anything. And then is Gaddison still on the board? Because I would take him. The tight end. Yeah, let's take him.
Rondé Gaddison.
He's probably going to go in the third round if things go the way they are. All right, let's see who else is on the board. Taj Brooks is.
We can roll with Taj Brooks because that's a nice.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's have some fun with this. Hey, we missed out on some of the top talent, but let's go ahead and let's double down. Let's get this shit together. And then we got one more. We got two more picks. Let's see. What do you think, Jay Higgins from Iowa?
That's where I'm going.
Yeah, let's go with Jay Higgins from Iowa. Because this is falling pretty nicely. I think that this is kind of like a worst case scenario draft in the sense of like you lose out on Genty, you lose out on some of these other players. But the 49ers drafting Genty would be kind of weird considering they still have McCaffrey, unless they're like, we're getting rid of McCaffrey.
Yeah.
I don't care what you do with this last pick, honestly.
You want to know who I think would probably end up here?
Let's go with Shiloh. Let's have some fun. Let's go. Let's take Shiloh.
I don't want to take Shiloh, but I guess we'll take him just because we'll be realistic. That's probably going to happen.
All right, let's take a look how we did. All right, so in round one, it kind of went left because we weren't expecting some of these players to come off the board. So we went with the Emeka Egbuka. You get the wide receiver alongside CeeDee Lamb. On day two, we went with Tyler Booker and Azari Thomas. You get a guard of the future. Or let's just say they don't take a guard. He'll be your starting right guard. And then you get a guy that's going to be depth or possible starter at your cornerback room. Day three, we went in the fifth round, CJ West, Jordan James, Kyle McCord, Gaddison. Again, I kind of get annoyed when they have Gaddison as an F because he's not dude, I'm shocked that he's not higher. And then also we doubled down at running back, taking Taj Brooks, Jay Higgins, and then Shiloh Sanders here. You get a lot of this infusion of depth along those particular position groups, and you kind of just go from there. And I think that that's the thing is you get control over these guys, and you just hope if they hit. If they hit, cool. If not, it is. And what was the total grade we got? Like a B or something like that? A B? Not bad. So, yeah, man, I think that, again, we're getting to the point because the combine's coming up. So we know that next week or the week after, our mock drafts are going to start looking wildly different because they started shifting a bit after the Senior Bowl, but they didn't move a whole lot. But it is what it is. So I was going to say, was there anything else, Chris, that you had for the show before we head out?
Nope. Everything good.
All right, sounds good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into this show of the Cowboys Roundup. We will see you all next week and see how things go from there as we get closer to the combine. Have a good one, guys. Goodbye.
Yep. Say it. Peace. And